Thanks for downloading a 3CR podcast. 3CR is an independent community radio station based in Melbourne, Australia. We need your financial support to keep going. Go to www.3cr.org.au for more information and to donate online. Now stay tuned for your 3CR podcast.
Welcome to another fantastic episode of Lost in Science, your primary source of science on, at least for the next half an hour, I hope. Just stay off the internet so that there's no other science that you're looking at. Claire, what have you got for us today?
This week I'm actually going to be speaking to a scientist. She's from Museums Victoria, and she's just been on an amazing deep sea creature trip with a whole lot of other scientists looking at new and amazing creatures of the deep. And they've brought them all back to Museums Victoria, and now they're like looking at what they got. They got a whole lot of new different species.
Weird things, aren't they?
Weird looking things.
Yeah.
Like, remember Mr. Blobfish from like a couple of years ago?
Yeah.
They got like Mr. Blobfish's like cousin.
Okay.
Like cousin it of Mr. Blobfish. So yeah, that's gonna be awesome talking to Melanie Mackenzie about that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Manisha, what have you got for us today?
I'm actually talking about something a little bit serious this week. And actually, before we go on any further, I just wanted to let our listeners know that I will be discussing sensitive subjects, something around mental health. So the subject matter could be triggering, and I just want all of our listeners to be aware of the fact that we will be discussing this towards the end of the show. If the topic isn't something that you want to listen to, the rest of our show will be fine, as you've heard. But I'll start my story with another trigger warning, just so you know that it's coming up. On a related note, if you ever need to reach out or seek help, we here at Lost in Science encourage you to speak to someone you may feel safe with. If you need to speak to a professional, we encourage you to contact Beyond Blue at 1300 22 46 36 or the Lifeline at 13 11 14.
Thanks a lot, Manisha. On with the show.
So you hear the phrase, we know more about observable space than we do about the oceans. And according to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration in the US, this is true, with 95% of our oceans still unexplored. But my guest today is helping change this. Melanie Mackenzie is collection manager for marine invertebrates at Museums Victoria and is just back from a voyage into the deep, dark abyss of the ocean, looking at what lives at 4,000 metres below the surface. Melanie, welcome to Lost in Science.
Thanks for having me.
And welcome back to the terrestrial world.
It is good to be on land. I've just stopped bumping into walls.
So tell us a bit about the Museums Victoria-led expedition.
Well, it was an expedition that went from Tasmania, so from the top of Tasmania all the way through to the Coral Sea off Queensland. And we were on a ship for 31 days on the RV Investigator. An absolutely awesome vessel, I must say. It's about 9 stories high. It's huge. It's actually very stable for a ship too, which was quite good if you're doing a lot of research.
Yeah, especially if, like me, you're prone to seasickness.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I was pretty good. I took a lot of ginger along, but I wasn't too bad, which was good.
Good.
And we were sampling all the way along that sort of area to about 4,000 metres. Sometimes we went a little bit deeper. We did some shallower surveys as well, basically looking at the abyssal region all the way along the eastern Australian coast. So it's an area that's never been looked at before.
Wow.
And it's just, it was amazing. And it was led by, chief scientist was Tim O'Hara from Museums Victoria, and we had CSIRO and the Marine National Facility and, of course, the Marine Biodiversity Hub. Those guys were all on board as well. So many awesome scientists from all around the world. It was just great.
Wow. It sounds like a real science party.
Yes, it was. But not that kind of party. It was a very dry ship. Don't worry about that. It was a very hard-working party, actually.
Yes. A working party.
Yes.
Exactly. So tell me, You were studying specifically the abyssal plains. I love that word, as I mentioned to you before. So what did you find down there?
Well, first of all, we found that the abyssal plains were not so plain.
Oh, okay. Right.
So I think what we were expecting to see was probably a lot of nice flat areas where we could easily collect like samples of animals and things like that. And instead what we were mapping were these huge canyons and giant mountains, and the poor scientists trying to actually land the equipment. I mean, they were trying to avoid mountains and boulders and a lot of rough area down there. So it was actually just really interesting to map it as well.
So previous to the RV investigator going out, you didn't know, or science didn't have any idea what was down there?
No, not at all. And basically, so this whole area, recently there's been a whole lot of marine protected areas created, I guess, Commonwealth Marine Reserves created along that sort of part of Eastern Australia. And we don't really know what's there, but as a nation, we're responsible for what's there. So we really need to map it and tell parks what's there so that they can then look after it and help preserve it for everyone else. And yeah, this was basically the first time we'd been down there. So.
Wow. So some of the discoveries that you did make, are they new species to science?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So we did find a lot of things. Look, we didn't know what to expect. Yeah. As I said, it was all new, all this sort of abyssal area around Australia. So we were finding some animals that we knew, many animals that we didn't know, and some stuff that was just plain weird looking. Like, I mean, you're talking about animals that are living at these extreme pressures and in this cold, dark environment.
Right.
And they're adapted in such different ways. A lot of them are just blobby looking, like. Yeah. So we had things like, you've probably heard about the faceless fish, and really what that was this...
A faceless fish?
Yeah, I know. It was the weirdest thing to see when it came up. And
could you not tell which end was its head?
Good question, actually. No, one end was tapered. I did notice that.
Okay.
So I was like, okay, that's the tail.
So that could be the tail. All right.
But it really did look like something you just wanted to draw a face on. It was just this weird blobby grey thing that had just no features. So you sort of think of a face and you think there should be an eyes and a nose and a mouth and all of that. And there was just nothing there. And apparently the juveniles do actually have eyes, but they're so deeply embedded under the skin and they're just not used. So you just can't see them. And a lot of animals down there, I mean, that's kind of what's happened over time. They've adapted to that area and they're in the dark. So if they don't need eyes, they don't use them. A lot of them have bioluminescence that they use, or other sort of ways that they're adapted to those environments.
And so that's the faceless fish. Any other standouts or favourites?
Okay, for me, just because I study holothuroids, it was the sea cucumbers. So,
yeah.
So I was just so excited. Like, I remember I got up one morning and I was on the 2 a.m. to 2 p.m. shift. So actually when I say morning, I mean really early morning, like 1 a.m. But I got up one morning and the guy said, "Oh, you have got to see the footage."
Yeah.
And I looked at the towed camera footage from the night before, and basically it was just these herds of sea cucumbers. Herds of gorgeous little sea piggy looking sea cucumbers, all facing into the current and feeding. And that was just so fantastic for me to see, because I work with museum collections and I don't often get to see these animals in their natural environments, and it was just fantastic to see. I also saw this gorgeous one that was swimming, and I saw this sea cucumber that came up, and I've seen similar ones in ROV footage and that before, but it has this fin on its back that makes it look like a shark. I mean, that's pretty cool. Shark sea cucumber.
That is very cool. That is very cool. Now, my image of the abyssal plains off the coast of Australia is of the majestic herds of sea cucumbers.
The majestic sea cucumbers.
It's fantastic. Do you have a name? Is there a collective name for sea cucumbers?
I'm going to go with herd.
Yeah, that's great.
We could say a pod, but I don't think that works.
No, I love that. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
You're listening to Lost in Science, airing across Australia on the Community Radio Network. Today we're talking to Melanie Mackenzie from Museum Victoria about exploring the final frontier beneath the ocean.
So you mentioned the towed camera. That's something that part of the equipment that you use to get down to 4,000 meters. Can you talk us through like how the equipment works? How do scientists get it down there? What sort of things do you use to collect the samples?
Yeah. So we had a lot of different kinds of deployments. So what we would do first would be to swath. Basically, you're pinging sonar off the ocean floor to try and map it first. And once you've mapped what it looks like down there, then you can kind of pick the best area to put your equipment down. And then if it's rocky looking, you probably wouldn't put the camera down because you don't want to smash it or anything like that. Yeah. So you have to sort of pick the equipment based on what the terrain looks like. And then you're putting down scientific sampling nets, so sort of like little mini fishing nets in a way. And you have sleds that catch much smaller animals. They get funneled into these cod ends.
Wow.
So you're
so
talking
are they
about
sort of like electronic or sleds that you can direct with a camera, or?
Yeah, you can't direct them with the camera so much. You have to, I think sometimes you have to use a bit of trigonometry as well, which I was quite surprised about.
That's very cool.
Yes, you use that original mapping to know where to put them. And then, you're using, gears and winches and computerized programs, but it does actually take a lot of skill on the part of, the chief scientists and technicians putting them down as well. And we, as the sort of sorting team, I guess, the scientists up on board, will watch cameras if there's cameras down, but otherwise, we'll keep going with our other work until we know that it's up near the top. So once it gets up close to deck, we all sort of get ready, get very prepared. We had the ice machines going.
So prepared means ice machines. You're all geared up.
Yes, geared up. We had to have the safety boots, your safety gear, your helmets, your life jackets, all that kind of thing. And we wait out on deck with big buckets or Nelly bins or whatever we think's going to come up, what kind of collecting equipment we need.
And there would be members of all sorts of teams there. So you'd have marine invertebrates and vertebrates and sort of...
Yeah, so basically the main two teams on board really, other than, of course, all the technicians and that, were the fishos, your ichthyologists, and then we had the marine invertebrate team. They're the two main ones. We were lucky enough to actually get a whale skull and some whale ear bones and a manta ray in there. So we did have some other vertebrates as well, but in general you've got the fish team and the marine invertebrate team, and of course the marine invertebrate team, you've got so many different phyla that you're trying to cover there, so that's the bigger team. So we'd wait and see what came up, and the crew would help to actually retrieve the equipment. And then when it was up on deck and we were cleared to go out and collect it, we'd take it back in buckets or bins or whatever into the lab, put it straight on ice, and then start sorting it into different groups. So you're just sort of starting off with a like with like. So you're putting all the stuff that looks wormy together, all the stuff that looks fishy together, all the stuff that looks sea cucumbery together, and then you're sorting more and more from that. So that's basically, you're just starting as this big... imagine you've got mixed lollies, you're just sorting them out. And then the science comes into it a bit more after that. And you start specifically looking down microscopes and trying to ID these animals a bit more. And one of the things is, because you're bringing them from so far down and they're coming through really cold, they start off at about 1 degree, like they're getting these Antarctic waters down in the abyss. And they're coming up through warmer waters. So you really have to try and keep them on ice and then preserve them as quickly as possible as well.
Right.
So we had to pickle them in ethanol or formalin or whatever we were using as well, or put them in the freezer. So, so it's a busy job, and it's a quick job that takes a long time, if that makes sense. And then afterwards, if we do have downtime, then you're doing a lot more sorting. So for smaller animals, so you've got tiny crustaceans, the things that whales eat, and little worms and things like that, you might be sorting for hours under a microscope to try and get those guys ID'd as well. So,
and when you bring something up like the faceless fish, for example, that's got a lot of coverage, do you know that this is going to be big?
You don't necessarily know, because different people are into different things as well. I mean, I love my sea cucumbers, but then we had a lot of polychaete people, worm people on board, and oh my goodness, when the whale skull came up, you should have seen them go. They're like, zombie worms, yeah! So these zombie worms are known to bore into bones. So if you get something like a skull down there, you might get one of these zombie worms that basically doesn't really have a head or anything. It kind of just digest things through its body. Yeah, so kind of cool. And then, of course, you have the pycnogonid expert. So when sea spiders come up, he gets really excited and he's like, oh my God, these guys have no eyes. How weird. And so you'll have different people excited about different things. But the good thing is that as scientists, we just really get into it and you really want to learn other things. So if someone's excited, then you look. Yeah.
Totally. It sounds like it's a great sharing of passion.
Oh, yeah.
There also seems like there's quite a tendency to get excited over things that don't have eyes or faces.
Well, I guess the thing is, that's kind of weird when you say that. But I guess what it is because it's from the abyss. So we're seeing animals that are very different to what we see in the intertidal zone or something because, they don't need the normal things that we need. And often they're quite gelatinous. They don't really have... They've got to maintain that neutral buoyancy really at those great pressures, and they've got to not be crushed. So, of course, they've adapted to that. Often they're just really weird and squishy. There's some odd stuff down there.
Yeah.
And you get those weird colours too. You get the bright... you get a lot of things with no colour whatsoever, and then you'll get something really bright red because, of course, red is black in the deep sea. So... and then you'll get other things with cute little fishing rods on their heads and, bioluminescent things, so glow-in-the-dark stars kind of thing. And, so some odd things.
What a weird world.
Yep.
What a weird world you've been living so close to for the last month. So now that you're back, when will the public get a chance to sort of see some of these amazing creatures?
Well, the very good news is that we already have a pop-up.
Oh,
so
fantastic.
The faceless fish is actually already on display. It's it's just a pop-up display, so try and get to the museum as soon as you can. It's at Melbourne Museum in Carlton Gardens. There's a pop-up of the faceless fish, and I think we've also got one of those little cups. So if anyone watched any of the news footage, we did send down some polystyrene cups just to show how pressure can change at that depth. So you'll see how tiny these cups can shrink, which is a good way to sort of explain it. We were talking to school kids and that while we were on board. So
fantastic.
So please sit down and have a look, and then we'll probably do a bit more of it later in the year as well.
Great. So for our Victorian listeners, head to Melbourne, to the Melbourne Museum to check that out. That's awesome. I will definitely be going along. Well, Mel, thank you so much for coming in today and sharing these previously untold stories of the deep. I can't wait to check out these creatures at the museum soon.
Great.
Traveling through another dimension. A dimension not only of sight and sound, but of mind. A journey into a wondrous land whose boundaries are that of imagination. That's the signpost up ahead. Your next stop.
Lost in Science.
The topic of my story today may not be new to some of our listeners, but I wanted to address it in our show. Today I want to talk about some psychological studies on mental health of farmers. And so before I begin, I just want to warn our listeners again that the content of this segment may be triggering or unsettling for you to hear, and you may not want to continue listening. If you're experiencing tough emotions or you need someone to talk to, please reach out and talk to someone. You can contact Beyond Blue, and their number is 1300 22 46 36, or you can contact Lifeline at 13 11 14. So now I'm going to begin. There's a high rate of depression and suicide among farmers and those that work in the agricultural industry. Much of this is put down to high work demands, low rewards, and a lack of control of one's experiences in their daily lives when they're trying to provide for themselves and their families. In 2002, Andrew Page and Lynn Farger from the University of Sydney published a study describing the rate of suicide among Australian farmers from 1988 to 1997. Their main conclusion was that over this 10-year period, 921 farm suicides were identified at a rate of one male farmer for every 4 days. And the rate of suicide among farmers was much higher than the national rates amongst males in the same age groups and also in the wider rural community or population. In 2013, Alison Milner and her colleagues from the University of Melbourne published a systematic review and a meta-analysis of suicide rates by occupation. They found that the rate of suicide among agricultural workers was 1.6 times higher than the average of all employed people. And this closely mirrored a report that came out of Queensland in 2010 that revealed that Queensland farmers were committing suicide at a rate of 2 times higher than the rate among the general population. And now these rates are a bit outdated, and the reports don't actually truly go into the factors that cause the suicide. And some of the limitations to the study are that they, first of all, lump farmers into these big homogenous groups. Mm-hmm. But they also, as I mentioned with the stats, I said that they talk about one male farmer every 4 days, because some of the studies have hard and fast rules about what's a farmer and who's an agricultural worker, and it doesn't take into account people like farmhands or people that aren't receiving their primary income from farms or agricultural lands, and it doesn't take into account families of farmers. So these numbers aren't exactly, they may not be exactly right, and they may be outdated at this stage. So one of the things that I realized was that I wasn't finding any studies that show any sort of relationship to maybe a causation, or there were a lot of these correlative studies, and the study I'm about to present is also quite correlative, but I thought it was something interesting. There weren't any studies that are on a smaller scale that identify the rates of depression amongst farmers and reveal the cause of the depression. But one article that I did come across was about the exposure of agricultural workers to chemicals that alter their brain function, and these chemicals are the pesticides that they use. So in 2014, John Beard and colleagues from different universities in the United States published a study in the Environmental Health Perspectives that showed that farmers that used fumigates and organochlorine insecticides had a higher rate of depression than farmers who did not use these chemicals. In their study, they analyzed data from 21,208 participants that used one of 50 specific pesticides that they focused their study on. They grouped these 50 specific pesticides into 10 pesticide classes. They spoke with the participants at enrollment between 1993 and 1997, and then again as a follow-up between 2005 and 2010 to survey the participants on whether they were diagnosed with depression by a physician. The participants were divided into groups. One of the groups was a group that had reported a previous diagnosis of depression at the enrollment, but not the follow-up, and this was about 28% of the participants. 32% of the participants reported depression at both the enrollment and at the follow-up, and then 40% reported depression at the diagnosis, but not at the follow-up. And the authors concluded that from the study, those participants that were using fumigants and organochloride insecticides continuously over the study period had a higher rate of depression than the rest of the participants. They also found that farmers with the highest number of lifetime exposure days to pesticides were 50% more likely to later have a depression diagnosis.
That's really high.
It's a very high rate.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the authors actually suggested that these pesticides are altering the brain function of the individuals using these chemicals, and they refer to studies where these pesticides have been shown to harm and destroy brain tissues and receptors in rats.
Right.
So, there's not any direct studies done on humans or in...
Yeah.
But, if you want to draw conclusions from other mammal species. So, on top of the stress of the job, as I mentioned, the farmers are often exposed to really poor working conditions or the lack of control and high work demands. There may be this occupational hazard of using these pesticides. I think that a lot of these studies, for me at least, the results seem a bit preliminary, and so it seems foundational. It seems like the starting point of where these studies could be going. But I'm sure that there are more studies being done, probably even at this very moment. So this would be a good space to watch to see how things are changing. Hopefully some studies will strive to study the full impact of pesticides, or even work towards just developing less harmful pesticides. Or even just having this discussion and bringing these issues into the open will provide a safe space for people to discuss their struggles. In either case, I feel that the rate of suicide, as you mentioned, Claire, is much too high. Suicide and depression is much, much too high. And more opportunities for us to discuss these circumstances and open up the conversation will be for the better. So I just wanted to end by, again, reminding our listeners that we here at Lost in Science encourage you to contact someone if you're struggling and if you need to speak to someone. We encourage you to contact Beyond Blue, and their number is 1300 22 46 36 or Lifeline at 13 11 14.
Okay, and that is it for another episode of Lost in Science. Now, if you are in Melbourne or you're able to get to Melbourne, remember that you can see the faceless fish and some other findings from the voyage to the abyss at Melbourne Museum. Lost in Science is, of course, recorded in Melbourne at the studios of 3CR, and it airs across Australia on the Community Radio Network. We'd love you to get in touch with us. Remember that you can always email us your questions or comments on lostinsci, LOSTINSCI, @gmail.com, or you can find us on Facebook, where we are Lost in Science on 3CR, or you can find us on Twitter, where I believe our handle is Lost in Science 1. You can also find all our podcasts on your latest favourite podcasting app. If you listen to us via iTunes, please get on and give us a good rating and review. You can also find us on the 3CR website, that's 3cr.org.au, or you can find us here on this radio station, same time next week, where once again, Stu, Claire, Manisha and Chris will get
Lost in Science!
Thanks for listening to a 3CR podcast. 3CR is an independent community radio station based in Melbourne, Australia. We need your financial support to keep going. Go to www.3cr.org.au for more information and to donate online.